in a region which has a large number of officially Muslim states, you have to wonder what principle is invoked here other than anti-Semitism. Because the notion that the Arab world is against having a religious state is nonsense. A great majority of them, in fact, one of the things that they have affirmed in Egypt after the overthrow of Mubarak is that it will be an Islamic state, and Islamic law will be embedded in the Constitution. And there are a couple of things about Israel that are particularly important to me. One of the arguments that we have seen, well, there are two arguments against democracy, and I'm a great believer in human rights, and that people everywhere have a right to basic democratic rights, the right to free speech, and the right to choose their rulers. There have been two arguments against democracy. Basically, the argument has been, for many people, that democracy is a luxury for rich white people. That it's okay for America or England or France, not just rich white people, but rich, safe white people. One argument has been, yes, you can have democracy, you're secure, but we're a besieged nation. We have enemies. We have people trying to undermine us. We cannot afford democracy. Democracy is a luxury for the safe. There is no nation in the history of the world that has been as besieged as Israel. It was born in conflict in 1948 when Ben Gurion declares the state. They're attacked by their Arab neighbors, overwhelmingly outnumbered. And from the beginning of its existence until today, Israel has been beleaguered and battled, at war in part with many of its neighbors, and despite that, has had a flourishing democracy. It is very important to have that example of Israel that says, oh, nonsense, you can't, that democracy is incompatible with being under siege. Because Israel has literally been under siege. Maybe you say, well, they fought out themselves, maybe it's their fault, whatever. There has been a warlike atmosphere between Israel and its neighbors, and there has been a steady alteration of political leadership. People lose the election, they walk away. But one thing that could have destabilized a lot of countries was that one of the, and I think there was a tragedy, there's no question, there were problems trying to get peace. I think there were two great tragedies. I think there were two men who would, I think, have been more successful than anybody else has been in bringing about a two-state solution, if it's possible. One was Yitzhak Rabin, the other was Ariel Sharon. They were both taken off the field, unfortunately, by a murder in one case, illness in the other. But when Rabin was murdered by one of his right-wing extremist opponents, there are democracies in the world that would not have survived that. This is a traumatic thing for democracy. And this very popular leader was murdered, and then he is replaced later on by, not that far on, by his the leader of the political opposition. It didn't cause a stir in Israel. There was never a doubt that this was going to just go forward. Well, yeah, you would expect that in England or France or the United States, but not much in the world. When Indira Gandhi was assassinated, there was much more concern and trouble, and democracy was much less assured. So the fact, and as a matter of fact, by the way, you compare Israel to the United States, the High Court in Israel has a better record of protecting civil liberties from arbitrary justice than the United States Supreme Court. The Israeli Supreme Court has found against the military and the territories. It has done a great job. As a matter of fact, some of the right-wingers have been trying to get legislation passed to weaken its role. And again, that's a great service that Israel performed. It's done it for itself, it doesn't do it as a service. But Israel stands out as a stunning repudiation of the notion that democracy is only for the secure. Similarly, Israel is now a very prosperous economic entity. It started out a pretty poor country. You know, if you're going to pick a place to have a country based on its natural endowments, the desert would not be very high on your list. And even with this extraordinarily high percentage of income that Israel has to pay for defense, it is a thriving economy. A thriving economy. Once again, there's been an argument that well, democracy is okay once you're rich, but you cannot have economic development in democracy. And one of the good things that's happened in the world is that, well, for a long time, China was doing very well economically, and other places weren't. China's done a very repressive system. By the way, those who argue that the nice thing about a flourishing free market is that it will inevitably bring democracy with it, I wish. Ain't happening. ain't happening in China. Even the great internet that was supposed to be a liberator, it's a two-edged sword. But what's happened in the past 5 or 8 years is that India, a great democracy, I give India credit for, again, mastering democracy in the face of tremendous linguistic diversity and a whole range of other problems, and religious changes. India is now doing very well. But Israel is, again, the best example of how a country under siege can, in fact, develop economically and have democracy. Two of the things that are supposed to stop it. There's a third area where Israel is a great lesson. It has assimilated an enormous number of immigrants, including, by the way, immigrants very different than the original founders of the country. When you talk about the Russians, yes, they have a lot in common with the Eastern Europeans, who are the main founders of Israel. But Israel has assimilated a number of Jews from the Arab world and the Ethiopian Jews. And once again, they have shown that immigration, properly understood, is a strength for a country, not a problem. Now again, having said that, I think they have to be tougher on the ultra-Orthodox who are trying to restrict women. By and large, that is the majority is there. Politically, sometimes you got to look up. You will read politicians sometimes bragging about how they stood up to their enemies. Please do not ever be impressed when a politician talks about standing up to her enemies. You know what happens when you stand up to your enemies? You send out a fundraising letter and you make a lot of money. What takes courage is standing up to your friends when they're wrong. That's hard. It's a great passage in the book by William Allen White about Warren Harding, who William Allen White inexplicably liked. And he came over the White House one day and Harding was pacing. And he said, "Oh, Mr. President, don't let your enemies get you down." And Harding said, "Oh, hell, White, I can handle my enemies. My goddamn friend here is driving me crazy." Well, that's a problem for Netanyahu. He's got some people whose votes he wants who are behaving very badly towards Arabs and towards women. He has to crack down on them. And I understand that. I have to say that the behavior of singling out Muslims for bad treatment isn't something we are totally unaware of in the United States. At any rate, I'm going to bring this to a close now, but as I said, on liberal grounds, Israel is by far the one country that really should meet standards. Even after the Arab Spring, no Arab country has yet embraced full democracy in a functional way. Israel has shown how you can have economic development under siege. It has shown how democracy flourishes and can be a source of strength for a country that's at war or near war. And so, yes, I do think that the Prime Minister has to be tougher on elements in his coalition. I believe that's what he'd like to do. And so there are places to move. But finally, I will say once again, twice in recent history, the Palestinians have been offered, under Bill Clinton's aegis and then under Olmert, a very good deal for a loser in a war. When you lose a war, there are problems. I think Israel has offered to treat the losers in war better than most countries have, except the United States. One of the great examples, I have to say, we shouldn't be self-flagellating. No country in the history of the world has ever been as sensibly and self-interestedly generous, that is generous in its own interest, as the U.S. after World War II. Germany and Japan today are flourishing, democratic, prosperous nations, and that's in part a tribute to the farsightedness of the United States after World War II. But Israel has also done a great deal, giving up Gaza, giving up southern Lebanon, giving up the Sinai. There's more it can do, but I want to say again, if you were just someone with left values, free speech, democracy, gay rights, equal treatment, no gender discrimination, freedom of religion, if you came to that part of the world with those values and knew nothing else about it, and you knew the history, yeah, there's been wars back and forth. One side started the war to wipe out the other, then once war starts, neither side is 100% right. There isn't any question in my mind that people on the left would come out with Israel as the place to support. Now let me just throw one last thing in about effort by some right-wingers to say, oh, well, Obama's not a good friend of Israel. No, he's a very good friend of Israel. I want to stress again. Your friend is one that gives you good advice, doesn't simply cheer you on whatever you did. And not only that, one of the most successful examples of diplomacy in recent American history, you know, it's always better to go back and read beforehand what the expectations were. But the Palestinians said they were going to go to the UN and get a recognition of Palestinian statehood. And the Obama administration engaged in wonderful diplomacy to keep that from happening. Now, they were always able to keep it from happening simply by announcing that they would veto it. But if there had been a majority in the UN Security Council for a resolution declaring a Palestinian state that failed only because it was vetoed by the United States, that would not have been a very good thing for Israel. What U.S. diplomacy did was to pull out all stops and use all of our influence and keep that resolution even from getting a majority in the Security Council. It was a great, successful act of diplomacy, not predicted, very important for Israel, and I believe appreciated by them. Now with that, I'm going to throw this open, and I'll be ready to respond to any questions or comments I have.
So they want us to have you use this microphone, so we're just going to go back and forth. But so first off, you lay out a great case in support of Israel from the left. When having those conversations with your Democratic colleagues, what is their typical response?
Well, I don't have to have it with most Democrats. There was this, I don't know where the perception comes, but if you look at the votes, Democrats are overwhelmingly supportive. There is one place where there's political reasons. Look, in the United States, there was one area where there was a significant, and has been for some time, Muslim population. That's in Michigan. There were a large number of Muslims living in Michigan, and people tend to reflect the opinions of the people in their district. So there has been somewhat less full support from a couple, two, three Michigan Democrats, three, maybe two of whom are still there. Some of the, a small number of the African American members have been critical, but there was a small minority. Overwhelmingly, they have been there. Now, there are some, I think, who take a kind of mistaken, and it's more outside of Congress than in, there's a kind of anti-imperialist strategy. Well, America's played a bad role in the world, and anybody that's, if you're on America's side, in the minds of some people, there must be something the matter with you. And I think that's overstated something. There's a little bit of an element on the left to see that, to see, you know, that the history of the world has been white people mistreating non-white people. Much of that is true. I don't think that's true about Israel. But I think that there's a little of that kind of leftism. There is, among many Democrats and Republicans, a concern, and this is partly because it's a democracy, that the need by Prime Minister Netanyahu to maintain his coalition may make it harder for him to show the flexibility in the settlement policy than he's shown. But again, I'm surprised that we didn't get more attention. You can go look it up. That's your quote from Casey Stengel, but nobody knows who the hell he was anymore. The manager of the Yankees, great success. But Netanyahu said there are people who are now living in Israel who won't be in Israel if I get the peace settlement I want. That's extraordinary. And the fear, of course, is that there are people trying to undercut that. But on the whole, if you look at the Democratic Party, there are differences about, well, let me give you one example of this. Newt Gingrich has now come out for moving the capital, moving the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. The capital, the U.S. Embassy has been in Tel Aviv since 1948. Newt Gingrich was Speaker of the House from 1995 through 1998, when his fellow Republicans kicked him in. He did not move legislation to change it. Now you can say, oh, well, that's because Labor was in power, they didn't want it. But when the Republicans took power again, when Netanyahu came to power, or when Sharon came to power, you had a Likud majority in Israel before the forming of Kadima, and you had a Republican majority in the Congress. They never moved Jerusalem. They're for moving the embassy in Jerusalem when they're not in power. I mean, that, as I said, that's an example of demagoguery. And Gingrich is now saying he would remove it, but we could have done it by legislation, and they haven't done that. So there is a rhetorical difference. I think, frankly, I will tell you, I think when I say to Netanyahu, look, you've got to really crack down on those right-wingers who are abusing innocent Arabs, and you can't allow the ultra-Orthodox to throw rocks at little girls who have their arms showing. It wouldn't be right, but I would at least understand that they were showing their puppies. But they're showing their elbows, and these guys are getting freaked out. I think you do a better job by helping him withstand these right-wing pressures, so Israel is better positioned in the world.
So we'll get to some other issues in a second, but does anyone have questions specifically related to what the Congressman has been talking about, or Israel at large, and we'll move on to the 2012 election, things like that?